I feel like our hopes for our ancestors is just to make them proud and to be able to go into these worlds, into these spaces that they weren't not allowed to go into, and just do everything we can in our lifetime. So just constantly thinking in the back of the head, making my ancestors proud, and how to keep going to lead to the future generations, to keep going forward and to keep making change. We really are
Yeah.
the change makers for sure. We gotta live up to
Truly.
that.
And welcome back, listeners and viewers, to another episode of the Unbreakable Podcast Network. I am so excited for this guest. We have my very good friend and my little niece, Brooklyn Neveu.
Yeah.
You just trained me on how to say it, and I still fucked it up.
It's a tough one. It's okay.
Neveu, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. And before we jump in, I really want to take a second to just acknowledge that I'm recording from Treaty 7 here in Strathmore, Alberta, and originally from the Yukon Territory, which has 14 nations. 11 of them, the last time I knew, were self-governing, but the town that I come from is the Tanquatchin, and the Kwanlin First Nation. And of course, Josie comes from Nova Scotia, so that's where the Mi'kmaq Nation is. So just to do an acknowledgement there and just acknowledge and recognize that the lands that we get to play on, work on, and share and learn on are that of our Indigenous family.
Tanse nitigason Brooklyn Neveu nitigason a guad namiwe sagahikinek o chinia. I'm Brooklyn Neveu, and I'm from Sturgeon Lake First Nation, and I am the daughter of Mark London and Tatum Neveu. My parents helped me grow up here in Saskatoon, Treaty 6. Yeah, I'm just so excited to be here today and talk about life, language, culture, everything.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And, I think let's take people into how you and I got to work together. We were working together through the Indigenous Student Success Program. And I'll let you tell people what that is and what we call it, because I think we rebranded it last year. And we did some really unique and interesting work together where we took kind of some Western colonial type beliefs and we married them together very traditionally. An elder and I worked very closely together to be able to bring something that was psychologically safe and resiliency based, but also was rooted in language and tradition and how we can work together and move forward. So maybe talk a little bit about the work that you're doing right now and maybe some of the things that you and I have kind of maybe touched on or worked in the past.
Yeah, for sure. So we met at our staff retreat for Witu Gamatutan Indigenous Student Success Strategy at Saskatchewan Polytechnic. So we met you that morning. I just traveled back from El Salvador, probably half asleep. I was there for about 2 weeks, and then now today I'm traveling back and I'm all sleepy again. We're just meeting always when I'm sleepy. And yeah, the work that we do, I'm a recent role change. I'm an Indigenous Student Support Coordinator. And for the past 3 years, I was an Indigenous student advisor. So basically, my job is just to be a cheerleader, an auntie, a support system for the Indigenous students here at Sask Poly while they're here, and just making sure that they're comfortable, making sure that they're successful, and making sure they have a community, a home away from home. So my office is centered in the student center. So it's been really nice to be doing the programming aspect this past year. I feel with being a past elementary school teacher that's where my heart is. And it's been really, really filling my heart and filling my creativity to be doing that. And yeah, we did some awesome workshops with you. I think was it last winter or the winter before?
Yep. Last winter.
And it was really awesome. First of all, the first thing we noticed is how jacked you were. Like, oh my gosh, this lady's so cool. Who's this auntie? And it was so awesome to get to work out with you and get to just speak from you. From the moment we met you, me and my colleague just thought you were so motivational and just taught us to use our voice, even if it might be like scary or vulnerable or intimidating to speak to management when something's not going right, or if you're not happy at the workplace, or if you just need to bring up some uncomfortable things. So it's been really awesome to do that. And also creating indigeneity into the whole campus and being able to bring those big ideas to the big wigs up there and making moves happen. So it's been really nice to be able to do that. Throughout those talks that we had, we were able to do a powwow and the first round dance and the first feast at the school. So it's been really awesome to to get to do that work and keep moving forward through the good work that you started us helping us do.
Mm. I love that. I love that. Thank you. And it makes me so happy that the organization is so open because it's not just about how many boxes can we tick to get how many indigenous bums in seats. I think there's a genuine authenticity, and you see that be it because actions express priorities. You see, language, for example, is a very important piece for you, something that you're very passionate about, and it's something that I embedded into the workshop very specifically because we did what they were world cafes where people walk around the room and they contribute their ideas, and it provides some psychological safety and it provides some autonomy to put your ideas out there. But I'll tell you, in Cree and in Michif, there's no translation for world cafe. Who knew, right? And
Yeah.
so the words that we ended up using translated to earth travel, right? To be able to put our feet down and to get up and move and collaborate together. Um, when you think about the work that you do, particularly around language and programming, when we look at those traditional activities, what is so important about that, and why does it matter so much?
I feel like growing up as an urban Indigenous person, especially in Saskatoon, I went from work living in the city, being in a very diverse community, being um, not just like the only person of color in my classroom, to moving to a small town about 20 minutes out. And I feel like there was a huge shift in my life where I went from being very comfortable to who I was to being almost, grew up very ashamed of being Indigenous, being the only person of color, me, my brother, and one other student probably until from grade 5 to grade 9. And just having that loss of culture, that loss of pride, that loss of identity because it wasn't around me, it wasn't available to me. And I feel like it was almost a different time about 15, 20 years ago where it wasn't as accessible to go to see language or to see culture or even to see like indigenous faces in spaces that are around you. So I feel like it's a duty for myself as my role and just as a my own personal self to make culture and language accessible to people that grew up like me or people that are reconnecting back with their identity and their culture. So I feel like that's my lifelong goal is to make it accessible to people.
And it was interesting too. Like I think we saw some really neat and very unique dynamics when we were in that room together because you're bringing a number of different people together, and we know that let's be honest. People aren't always going to like each other when they work together, but the ability to be able to respect each other, to walk toward the roar and have hard conversations, I think is a really powerful asset. But there's also learned behavior through a lot of the generational traumas that your family has experienced before you. And the observation is that every indigenous person in Canada has been impacted in one way or another by residential school or day school or those atrocities, right? And I think what we see in that is our behavioral dynamics of how I treat you in a laterally violent way, where it's like, I don't like that. And so instead of coming and having a conversation with you, I'm going to retaliate against you because that's what I taught. That's what I was taught. And that's what I learned.
Exactly. I feel like for a lot of indigenous people, it can be almost scary to work or to be alongside other indigenous people because there is that legacy of that lateral violence, and just as an individual, making sure that that line gets cut off with me, and making sure that other indigenous people feel safe, that they can grow, that they can flourish and be themselves, and to be able to speak how they want to speak and share how they want to share. So I feel like it's really important to be mindful that you could be laterally violent and to undo those teachings that were forced onto us.
I think you're right. And the other part of that too is, I know an Indigenous activist out here, and she's wonderful. I would actually not even say activist, educator. And she always says, she's got to find balance. And I think this is where, for young Indigenous people like yourself, it becomes a challenge, especially depending on the environment that you're in. It's almost, as she puts it, one foot in a moccasin and one in a high heel shoe, and they don't match. And so it's finding that balance. How do you find that balance?
Right? That's such a common mindset to have, the walking in two worlds. I feel like honestly, like you kind of need it to be successful. in a career wise as an Indigenous person, because you want to have that maintained to culture and to your identity and to yourself. But sometimes in some spaces that's still not like welcome yet, or that's still not appreciated yet. And to be able to walk in those two worlds and be that like professional or that settler side that you can have to get yourself into those doors to be successful. And I'm really grateful for a workplace like this that has a department for Indigenous people. Because even just like growing up, not even having an Indigenous teacher till grade 12 is shocking. So yeah, I definitely relate to that. Having to walk into those two worlds and just I feel like these last few years just being confident within my identity and not ever going back to that self that I was as a kid of that shame. It's like, no, this is who I am and I'm so proud of who I am. And to just keep like growing and learning. You can never stop learning from everywhere.
I think that's right. And it's also a really great point is that and you and I and some of your other colleagues had a lot of conversations about this. You are cycle breakers. And really when we talk about that unbreakable spirit, self-determination is a term that's applied to Indigenous Canadians very frequently, Indigenous people around the world probably.
Mm.
And that unbreakable spirit, where does it come from in you?
I just feel like maybe it's from my ancestors, my grandparents, my parents being able to keep going after all the hard times and to have parents that didn't let me quit no matter what it was it whether it was sports, whether it was work or going back to school. When I was finishing grade 12, I was so done with school that I was like, I don't want to keep going for my education. And if it wasn't for them, I'd probably be working like a random job. And they pushed me to go to school and just to apply through ITEP. So I feel like for sure my ancestors and my family keep me going, and seeing that their success in a different way than mine, it keeps me going and keeps me going for my little brothers as well.
I was just going to say, you've got younger brothers who are on the come up behind you. And so,
Mhm.
if you truly want to be a cycle breaker, it means that you really have to stay in that focused area to say, this is who I am and this is the type of person I want to be. Because you step away from that, those little boys are watching you.
Yep,
I say
for
little
sure.
boys, but they're high school, right?
Yeah, high school, and one's 3 years younger than me. Yeah, just, recently we went through, a family dynamic change where my mom and my stepdad separated, and it got pretty messy, and it brought up a lot of trauma and a lot of change and a lot of stuff that was not told when we were kids, or just, like, it all started to make sense with my childhood. Lots of stuff was clicking around that time, and being the oldest sibling, you're often almost like a second parent, or you are I'm a very opinionated, as my mom says. I like to speak my mind, and it's hard to hold it back sometimes. So it's been tough, but it's been so rewarding. I feel like it's brought us all closer together, and we wouldn't be the family that we are today without that happening. And yeah, just showing my brothers that like it's okay to stick up for yourself. It's okay um to go through hard times and to come out stronger through them.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you experienced that. It's always so hard when somebody like when you're re-traumatized, when something comes up and it comes out of the past. And so, how do you? And what are some of the strategies that you put in place to keep yourself mentally well? I mean, you have a very robust connection into culture. So I want to hear about that, but also talk about some of those things that maybe aren't so cultural, but that facilitate really great things. I mean, you and I worked out together. I know that you're really into fitness. So start over at the cultural side and then talk about the things that are kind of the more day-to-day mundane stuff that gets you out of bed in the morning and help keep your compass focused.
Sounds good. Um, I feel like I wasn't actively doing this before, but when we were at our retreat, when we were with the elder, when we did the visual of the medicine wheel
Yeah.
and seeing it when it was off balance, I often do that just in my own head. And culturally, my dad's a round down singer. He's pretty well known around Treaty 6 area. And I grew up with him singing all the time and being around smudge and being around ceremony like that and going to powwow. So it's really nice that the urban cultural opportunities have really grown in Saskatoon. There's so many round dances and powwows, and there's sweats available. There's workshops to do beading and ribbon skirt making. So I often just find myself wanting to go to that. So I find when I'm feeling off, I need to go to ceremony. I need to go to these events to make me feel grounded. I just went to Black Hills Powwow, the
I
Hisapa,
saw.
Wachipi, it was unreal. It was unreal. I'm so grateful to my friend, the Wapas family, for taking me with them. It was very last minute. It was so nice to go to that. So things like that keep me grounded and keep me going. Culturally, a goal is I've always wanted to be a powwow dancer. I did it when I was like probably a toddler till about 5, and then that was kind of like that period where I didn't really have the same access. Um, my dad's mom passed away, and she was really into pushing me towards that when I was younger. But yeah, that's one of my goals is to start dancing. So that's something that's keeping me going. Being able to go around to powwows, listening to the songs, learning the moves, being around friends that are just so culturally grounded. I have some really good friends that have really good families that are really ingrained in their identity, that come from Thunderchild, the Wapas family, and the Oaks family that come from Niigini. They're two of my best friends, and I've learned so much from them since I met them. So I'm really grateful to them. So I often go to them when I'm in need of cultural grounding.
Well, I think that's so important, right? Like to have people who understand that part of yourself that you're still trying to uncover. A couple weeks ago we had Earl Thiessen on here, and Earl is the executive director of Oxford House of Canada. And for him, he's coming up onto, I think, his 18th year of sobriety. And through that, the deduction that we made even on the podcast was Earl's basically 18 years old culturally. Like he doesn't know what he doesn't know. Right. And, I have another friend who is a counselor for the Siksika First Nation out here on Treaty 7. And, we talk about it, like he's got all of his girls in dancing and very, very connected to the culture and, cares for his parents. I'll tell you, he was saying that during COVID, he couldn't keep his mom home. She wasn't being very good. And so he went out and he took her teeth and he brought them back to town from the reserve. And so he's like, well, she's not going anywhere because she won't go out without her teeth. I says, oh, that's what you think. Wait until she wants to get out bad enough. She'll wear her mask over her mouth and nobody will know. But that's the thing too, is like we, I remember, like, so we've been a family who subscribed to Indigenous Box since before they even launched, right? And so Mallory up in, I think she's Treaty 6. She's Sturgeon Lake Cree, and
Maybe we're
so
cousins.
she, yeah, yeah, and so yeah, she's northern, and she started this because she went through her supply chain management degree, and in that degree, what she found was that the first supply chain, the Indigenous supply chain, had been extinguished, right? And so she started by gathering all of these people, saying, "Hey, you're making hand lotions and face serums and hair serums for Indigenous hair, and you over here you're making your own coffee, and oh, you over here you're making moccasins and mucklucks, and oh, you wrote a poetry book about how to connect to self." Like, and so what she did was she went out and got all these different things. And so we receive the box and we use it. Like if there's something in there that we really like, we'll take it. I got this pecan hair serum. Oh my Lanta. It was the best I ever had. I'll find out who it was because it's just
Yes,
like it was wonderful.
sounds
Um,
awesome.
but I received this mug one time, and there are some gifts that come in this box, and I look at them and I go, these gifts are not for me. Like they are ones that I take and I put, and I actually have a box downstairs. And when I find somebody who I think would really appreciate and value them, then I take them and I give them. And I think actually almost all of the giveaways that we had at the retreat came out of my Indigenous box. So
Oh,
everything I did, all my games, remember my hand games that I came
yeah.
up with? We were gambling and nobody, don't tell anybody. But one time they gave me this mug, and the mug on the outside said, "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams." Like when you think about that, you think about that statement, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. What do you think about that?
I feel like our hopes for our ancestors is just to make them proud and to be able to go into these worlds, into these spaces that they weren't not allowed to go into, and just do everything we can in our lifetime. So just constantly thinking in the back of the head, um, making my ancestors proud, and how to keep going to lead to the future generations, to keep going forward and to keep making change. We really are
Yeah,
the change makers for sure. We gotta live up to
truly.
that. Hmm.
Truly. And so how does that play out in the work that you do with these students? Because, I would believe that, some students come to you and they're very culturally connected and they're ready to rock and roll and, tan a hide. I mean, what were we doing in the student center that one day? One of the guys had us in there like stripping I had so much elk hair on my skirt, or yeah, maybe it was caribou hair because we were stripping the fur off of it with the tools, the traditional tools. Um, but then I would imagine that you also have a lot of urban Indigenous kids who what they've experienced has been volatile because of the color of their skin and the misperception of the society around them. Like, that's a balancing act. Like, I mean, you're very fortunate because you're an educator by trade. Like, that's what you went to school for. So to a degree, you come equipped with tools that maybe not everybody does from like that social worker perspective, without saying social worker, because that's not what I mean. But you know what I mean? It's like, how do you help bridge the balance and the divide to make sure that the culturally ingrained student understands the value of going to class and getting the grades? And then how do you make sure that the urban Indigenous kid who has no connection to culture understands the value of what culture can lend in their studies?
I feel like it is a balancing act for sure. Coming from the ITEP program, I feel like that left such an impact on me. It really ingrained me into the culture and into language specifically. I got introduced to the land-based program, the land-based languages certificate. Sorry, um, and I saw the importance of that and how it went from like one career moment to switching careers completely into SAS Poly here. And I feel like it's important for everyone to continue their learning on culture, whether they've been growing up with it forever or they haven't had access to it. Kind of like that urban Indigenous, that shame aspect. And there's definitely like there's quite a few of that happening where people are very cultured and they're away from home and they miss it. So they really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate when they come into the center and feel that community that they don't have currently, and having the access to the culture when they are available with their studies. And also the students that are maybe coming back to it because they didn't have it for a long time are students that are still on that like shame aspect where it's kind of like it's hard for them to want it to grasp at it. So I feel like to make it digestible is the right word for it, is making it light but also making it rewarding and refreshing for students who already have that culture. They get that sense of home with them and they get that refresh, that balance that they need. Like I was saying myself, to keep myself culture balanced, they feel refreshed after that to continue on to their studies. And then for the ones that don't have access, I feel like it's just enough to get them engaged and keep them interested in going. And then it often leads to them wanting to learn more about their identity and their culture.
Which I think is fabulous, right? We should be curious, right?
Mhm.
And the success of the success that culture can bring, right? It's you look at the way that we get to self-actualization, which is Maslow's hierarchy, right? So food, safety, shelter, all the basics are the foundation, but then the next piece up is belonging. And so you think about someone who's maybe had a bit of a troubled childhood or maybe adolescence where maybe they didn't make the best decisions. They fell in with the wrong crowd because let's be honest, Saskatoon has a great area for that. I mean, I come from the far north, trust me. If I want to fall in with the wrong crowd, they're waiting, they're salivating. Hey, another one. Yay. Um, so you look at that and then you bring them in and you provide them with this psychologically safe space to explore and to ask questions. How do the programming that you put in place create that balance, particularly for um, those who might feel some level of shame to be able to embrace themselves? Because I think there's a psychological component to that of being able to love who you are as you show up. And I don't know that that's only connection to culture, but I think culture starts to say you belong. And so how do you do that through your programming on that individual basis too, right? Because it's not just about, we're going to do some beadwork and whatever, but as you're beading, the layers of the onion start to fall away, right?
For sure. So yeah, the student center, Isitoskatoyak means gathering together, I believe. I often refer to the student center as a home away from home and keeping
Mm.
that energy there. And I feel like people really feel it, whether they're a frequent visitor or they come once in a blue moon. I feel like just creating lots of opportunity. So either whether it's a soup day, the beading day, we have ribbon skirt workshops, we have speakers come in, we have an elder that comes in on a weekly basis, and then we have the Wichituin Transition Program, which is a week-long program before the students start school, and it's open to any Indigenous students during post-secondary here at Sass Poly, and it's all across our 4 campuses, and it's a way to just get them comfortable on the campus, and I feel like our program truly makes a difference. They get to learn about all the services that happens at Sass Poly. And Amy and I, my coworker, the past 2 years we've been running it individually. The advisors prior to us, they were here for about 10, 11 years, and they had their way of doing it. One was non-Indigenous, and there was a lack of that culture, that sense of
Mm,
identity there. And we had our first feast, our first ceremony, and pipe at this past program. So it's been really awesome. I feel like that week long is like a little teaser into getting people excited to come back into the center and to keep wanting to learn more. We did medicine picking, TP teachings, the pipe feast, and I feel like I'm missing something else. But yeah, just giving that little teaser of community and culture. And I feel like every student that's been in those programs, they always crave more. So making it just accessible to people. And the ones that are feeling that shame, I feel like it just starts with comfortability and community, making sure that this is their home, even though they might not feel like it's their home, or maybe they're going through a rough time and their outside life is taking over of their schooling, just making sure that, oh, there's a hot pot of coffee there for them, or there's a meal there for them, or there's a place for them to sit and relax, or a place for them to sit for hours if they need, or just a person that says hi to them. Just making people feel comfortable as soon as they come into the door, I feel like is
mhm.
really important, and it just makes people want more.
I agree, and I think the other part of that is that especially if you're coming from that urban shame-based focus where when you walk into a store, somebody starts following you because of the color of your skin. Like, that's one of the other ladies that I had on my previous podcast. She said, "It's all well and fine. I don't get to take a day off from being Indigenous. This is
Yeah.
what I deal with every day."
Mhm. There's literally some stores in Saskatoon that I just, like, avoid because I know that they're a little bit more intense with that. But, yeah, you can't shut it off no matter how much you try, but being just embracing it and being strong in those moments are really important. Yeah, there's some stores I just will not give, like, my services to. I won't spend money there just because of the experiences of that. But, yeah, that's an interesting thing. You almost go through this weird um resistance when you're in the stores. Like I'm like, oh, I have to act as white as possible, or I have to really show my hands or not wear a certain clothing. My friend and I, we were laughing on the way into Shoppers because we just wanted to grab some quick makeup or something after a round dance, and we both took off our skirts. We're like, we don't want to be followed into Shoppers. Shoppers is like one of the worst ones. And it's just like it's funny that you have to like change your clothing or behave a certain way or have a certain body language so you're not like so those things don't happen to you, or just being extra friendly to the workers, or like it's silly to have to go through that. But yeah, I definitely can relate to that.
Yeah, and I mean, I cannot. Right? And that's I mean, that's a privilege that I get to live with every single day is the fact that, you know, if you were to walk into a store with me, would you have to feel the way that you felt walking in with another Indigenous friend?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you'd probably have some anxiety around it, but you probably wouldn't feel as much of the pull to actually act in that way. And so that I think that speaks to the deficiency, and I think it speaks to a number of social ills as well, right? The culture of a lot of these cities that we live in, we're still facing a lot of breakdown in supports and reconciliation activities, right? We look at, the report that came for Truth and Reconciliation and those calls to action. And we spoke to Earl. His call to action was call to action number 21, which was government funding for rehabilitative support services. When I redesigned the government of Yukon, the Department of Justice, when we rewrote their Corrections Act, it included land based healing because you're taking these people and you're just continuing to iterate trauma, and you're not giving them the tools to actually connect to land and to ancestors and things like that. And so what you get are these perpetual cycles, and they never go away. Like it stays, as I say, of this crazy eight instead of becoming a beautiful infinity. And it's great when we have like Bell Let's Talk Day and we have, Truth and Reconciliation Day. Those days are important. We should be talking about mental health and well-being. We should be talking about the fact that every child matters. But how performative are they as opposed to the change that they truly drive?
For sure. Um, yeah, I feel like just this past year with Orange Shirt Day passing, there was a few Indigenous people that agree with that performative aspect of it. And I feel like a lot of change has happened in the past, probably the 5 years when the George Floyd thing happened and the graves were being announced. And that was all during COVID, which was a very hard time for some people. And I often look back at that time as a good time because those two big movements created real change for both of our countries, for at least awareness for non-Indigenous and non people of color. Um, and sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry. Could you refresh it? Sorry.
Well,
What your
just in terms of like the performative
Yes, for
activities
sure. Yeah.
around that.
I just feel like it's so important to create that awareness, especially I've noticed with working with all the programs here at SAS Polytech, there is a huge population of international students. And I was speaking with a past colleague when I was working during post-secondary schooling, and we were talking about his citizenship test. And I think there was like maybe 3 or 4 questions about Indigenous history or like Canada's history and referring to Indigenous people. And I found that so shocking. And I feel like it really makes sense of why Canada can be such a racist country towards Indigenous people, because the people that are coming in are told not to talk to us, not to trust us, that we're bad people. I've heard that countless times while interacting with these students through the Kairos blank exercise. And it just proves to the fact that that test isn't doing anyone any service when you're taking this citizenship test, because they're not learning anything. And then when people from their country or people that are working for our government are telling them not to trust us, it just like it almost like takes us so many steps back and wondering why our country is like this. And even though it's a very hard work, the blank exercise, if anyone doesn't know, it's about a 2 hour exercise where we go into a 45 minutes like play script that's interactive with the group and talks about the 500 years of colonial history, and then we finish off with a talking circle. And 99% of the time people are just like gobsmacked, shocked that they didn't know that this happened, and that lots of times these international students are students that had maybe a bias or a different perspective of Indigenous people or Indigenous history. Their minds are always changed. It's crazy that they have to go through. It can be a traumatic experience because, especially for me and my coworker, we have to open up that trauma and list all these things that happen to our people, and to see how it impacts us every time we read it, but seeing how it impacts the people that didn't know before. So there is a lot of work to be done for sure with that. And um, even though it can be performative, I guess in my perspective is we have to do it right and to do it effectively and to do it well for the future generations, and to not have any of this stuff happen again or have these biases, or to have um not support from the country or from non-Indigenous people. We have to do this work nice and slow and do it right, so we don't ever go back to any of these problems or these histories that happened before.
You're right. Too fast is too slow, right? Because you end up ramming something in, and somebody doesn't understand the purpose behind it. And that was one of the things that I was always very cognizant of, was the blanket exercise. And I think about the fact that, everybody has a history. Everybody has something that's gone on. I talk about this in the book quite a bit, is that it's never about my trauma is worse than yours, your trauma is worse than mine. What is trauma to you is um, it's important and it's meaningful. And that's one of the things that I've always thought about, is the facilitation of the blanket exercise and what that does for you and your colleagues who have to facilitate it, because it's not even just about what's happened to your people. It's what has happened to your grandparents, to your aunties, to your uncles, to your cousins. I mean, the last residential school wasn't even closed in Canada until the 1990s, right?
Yeah, 45 minutes away from here. Yeah, I feel like my two coworkers and I, we kind of alternate in between each other to do these blank exercises. I feel like I almost have like a routine. I get really excited at first because I'm going back into a classroom speaking with students and knowing that the end result is going to be good. And I go from that happy mood. And I feel like collectively, everyone that's in the blank exercise, their mood changes. I
Yeah.
forget what page it is, but it switches and everyone's mood changes. And I can find myself holding tears back or just like needing to gather myself. And it's not great sometimes, but I do have to disassociate to what I'm reading sometimes because it is super triggering and almost disassociate from the talking circle. I would say most groups, like 90% of them, have been really great and really impactful and really emotional. And you can tell that these people really care. But there has been the odd time where it's like this did not get through to these people. And it's that kind of Saskatchewan rural kind of like farmer vibe that you can tell that they grew up in a very different way than what I have. And those are the times where I have to dissociate with my feelings and with my personal history. Like, yeah, this happened to me, and you need to understand that this it's not that far away. It's right here. It's happened to someone right in front of you, and everyone's been affected that is Indigenous. Even though it is triggering, my colleagues and I, we do make sure that we have a good laugh or we do something to get our spirits back up afterwards. And just knowing that we're making a true change for people, changing perspective is really important. And even though it can be triggering or hard for me to do, I'm glad that I'm making a change for someone else and hopefully leading to better change for the future.
Well, and that I think is part of being a cycle breaker is that we sometimes absorb the the pain that other people because we're strong enough. We've gone through it, we've coped, we have mechanisms. So when you think about how like if you were to look back and do like a little inventory and you think about your your call to culture when things get unsettled and when you're feeling like you might need it, where do you go from there? You do a blanket exercise. Let's say that it was really a challenge for you that day because of whatever, right? Maybe it's somebody special's birthday. Is it something where you would go back to the student center and smudge, like, where you clear that energy out, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, for sure. We smudge often in the student center, so I find that I will go to smudge for sure. Laughter is the best medicine, honestly.
Yeah.
My coworkers and I we're always laughing about something. So as long as we're having a chat and just debriefing and not continuing to discuss it in a way that makes us upset is really important. And yeah, movement is a big medicine for me as well. I try to move my body every day, so I always make sure, for sure, on those days to move how I need to. Not if I don't want to force myself and push myself too hard, and just finding the exact movement that's good for me in that moment. And yeah, just speaking with my parents is always good. Speaking to friends, and if there's a cultural activity in the city here, I'll go to that for sure. But yeah, movement and laughter for sure.
I think that's one thing people underestimate with Indigenous people is how humor and play. And I think it's because people, I honestly, I'm going to say this, and I say this with all love. I think people take Indigenous people too seriously, you know, because growing up north, like I tell stories all the time, and people are like, "That's literally what." Like, there's this little girl who lived across the street from us, right? Her name's Eleanor was her name. And so, I mean, we grew up in a we were actually the minority where I grew up with, being Caucasian, right? And so I remember she'd come over and she had sticky fingers. And so she walks out one time with this out of our garage with like, pencils with my sister's name on them. So the next day we're at school and I see her writing with my sister's name on a pencil. I says, Eleanor, how'd you get those pencils? Where'd you get those from? Oh, I found them on the road. Everything she had, she just found it on the road. Like for her, she's like, no, it was on the road. So I just picked it up and I'm using it, right?
Funny.
Or, my daughter will sometimes come to me and she'll be like, oh, hey, smell this, smell that. And I'm like, I don't smell anything from anybody's hands because I got held down by a boy who was like, you want to, and I was like, nope, get out of here. Right. But it's just like the humor and the ability to enjoy. And, I mean, I think that the one, and I don't know about Saskatchewan, but like home, I kid, like, I kid, like, I mean, it's just like, it's just a constant joke. I always say if an Indigenous person's not making fun of you or poking fun at you, they probably don't like you.
Exactly. Exactly. That's how we communicate. That's how we show love. Yeah, for
Hmm.
sure. I feel like we need the humor. I'm so glad that it's such a strong thing with our people because we've had experienced so much trauma, and we're still experiencing the trauma and still trying to break those cycles. And if we didn't have that humor and that laughter, like, we would be so much further back, I feel. So it is truly the best medicine for sure.
Yeah, we did. We laughed a lot in our, in our offsite. Oh my gosh, I remember, what was it that Elder Donna had? She had that little dish, and if you were on your phone, she charged you a toonie every single time you were
She's
on your
so
phone,
funny.
and she just you and you and you and you and she, oh yeah, she's a riot, that one.
She's awesome. I've never met an elder like her, and she's truly so funny. It's nice to see people that, not that she doesn't take it serious, but to just be like so chill and so funny and so just straight up. And we needed that for sure.
Oh, she is so straight up. I'll tell you what. So she and I, they come to me. I was helping with a conference last summer, and we're doing the conference, and they said, "Hey, you think you could get your soul sister over there to join us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can get her." I call her Souli because the first time we ever met together, she said, "I feel like you're my soul sister," and I says
Aw.
to her, "No, I think you're right." And so I send her a text. I text her all the time to check in and just see how her and her husband and little baby Ray are doing. Um, and so she says, "Yeah, I'll come." And so I said, "Okay, I'll make sure that, we've got everything in order. Bring Ray if you need to, whatever, as her helper." And so they show up. So we had Cadmus. He was there as our one of our
Oh yeah.
keynotes, which is just always such a delight. Like, he's just lights out, probably one of the best leaders I think I've ever had the ability to collaborate with, and on such important things. An interesting fun fact: his wife is a Siksika woman from out here. So he's married
Cool.
to a Blackfoot woman. So we're in there, and I can't remember what it was, but they did a lecture, and they did, like, Cadmus did his piece, and then they had a couple people come up and speak and whatever. And she got up. They said, "Okay, well, Elder, do you have anything to add?" She gets up there, and she's in her ribbon skirt and her t-shirt, and she shuffles on up, and everyone's bated breath. Now, what I failed to mention is this was the entire scene, like the executive. So director to the CEO
Yeah.
in the room. And she gets up to the podium, and that's the one thing: you give Donna a microphone and Donna's going to tell you what's what. And so she gets on the microphone and she goes, "I was actually getting ready to like ask a question. Do I need to come in here and breastfeed all of you guys or what?" And I was just like, and of course I'm sitting at the table with like all of the other Indigenous Student Success leadership team, and we're like, my God, Donna, what did you just say to this entire executive team? But basically, she was calling them a bunch of whiners. And she was like, I wasn't sure where we were going with this. And I was like, am I going to have to nurse all of you? And like, I was like, I can't believe she said that. And so everybody kind of looks at me, and I was like, sorry, this is my charge. I'll go and, like, get the giant coat hook and pull her off. But I think what that speaks to, when we look at the authenticity and we continue to bring someone back who says the hard stuff, who calls people out on their in those big rooms, is you're getting authentic Indigenous representation, because we're not censoring and silencing her. And you know it reminds me of a time, like, my best friend from home. She's this wonderful human being who was the first female four-person in this rock crushing company up in the north. And she left her job, and I said to her, "Hey, I've got this big construction job. Did you want to come work for me?" She goes, "I've never been a consultant before." I said, "I didn't ask you if you've been a consultant. Do you want to come work for me? I need people with industry experience, not consulting experience. I got lots of that." And so she did. And we would sit in meetings and we would chit chat, and I would give her action items, and I'd say, "Okay, I'll put a check-in point on your calendar, and I'll email you all this stuff after the fact and whatever." And afterwards, my business partner, he says to me, "Why would you do that? Like, she's literally in the meeting. She's a grown woman and she can do these things." And I said, "Yeah, but there's two things that happen for me. Number one, she's never worked as a consultant before. So we need to help her be a consultant." I said, and then the second thing is that how she's showing up is in her authentic self. You can't talk about the fact that, we are a diverse and inclusive organization and then expect people with their diversity and their inclusion to just conform to the way that we do business solely, because that's how we see it. Like, that is performative, right? It's a fine balance. How do you find that balance? What does that balance look like for you? Because, I mean, you think about it, I want you to be authentic, but let's be honest. I had another lady on my podcast a couple of years ago, and she said two things are brand new to Indigenous people: time and money,
Yep.
right?
Exactly. I feel like it's really important just to like, speak up if you are not comfortable with something or you're not aware of something or you don't know how to do something yet. I feel like growing up I was a very shy person in social settings and very loud at home, and just learning to use my voice and just how I do at home and speak what I say um when I need to, and being okay with not knowing everything. I feel like people are not can have a hard time with that, being vulnerable or being showing that that they can't do it. And I feel like everyone learns differently too. I feel like being a teacher, seeing all those different learning ways of learning that students go through, someone might not learn how to do it verbally, or they might need to see it, or they might need to actually do it to learn how to do it. And I feel like I'm a person that needs to do it first alongside someone so I know how to do that skill. So I feel like just being aware that um to show people in different ways, not just telling them and instructing them, but showing them and going and guiding with them and working with them until they are comfortable is important.
I like it. Okay, I'm going to ask you a hard question as we wind down here. I'm going to ask you two viewpoints. Okay.
Sounds good.
So I'll tell you what they are and then I'll come back to them. So the first one is I want you to, if there's, give me, what would you say to a young Indigenous person who's struggling with their identity to invite them to embrace and join culture to find the benefits of that? What would that look like? What would you say to these young people who, or even not so young people who are on this journey, and and make no mistake that what you say here translates to other cultures as well. But what does that look like when what's your best advice to connect to culture and self?
I would say just don't be afraid. Learn about your identity. It's never too late to learn, no matter where you are in your learning journey. I feel like social media is such a great platform, and sometimes it can be so negative, but social media has truly helped. I found so many different creators that are Indigenous. I met some really cool people this past weekend, even that are Indigenous creators, and just giving that access to culture. Like maybe they've never been to a powwow before and they really want to,
Mm,
but being able to watch it on YouTube or watch it on TikTok or watch it on social media is so cool. The accessibility is awesome, and just keep learning for sure. Um, I recently started becoming a team member for Mio Movement, and that's where I've found being able to have my creative outlet for language. So I post language of the week there, and then my medicine wheel reflections where I talk about my week and how I balance myself. Yeah, just keep learning. Don't be afraid. And I feel like the more you're never it's never too late to learn more about yourself.
mhm. Yeah, I think that ties in really well with my pick a word of the year, right? Is, maybe this will inspire someone to pick their word to be culture and they can
Hmm.
embrace that, because, and the one thing, Josie and I actually just had a bunch of stickers made. And, one of my favorites is validation is for parking. And I think there's so much fear out in our world of being myself because what are people going to think of me? Well, they already have their own notion of what they think of you based off of what they see.
Exactly. Hmm.
And so I think it's one of those IDGAF type things where
Exactly.
just get up and have less thought of what other people will think, right? Okay. So that was a great answer. You've passed the test. Now, the second one, if you were to be able to deliver a message to people who just maybe need to be a little bit more respectful or compassionate to Indigenous people, what would
Yeah.
that be?
That's a good question. I feel like my answer is pretty similar, is not being so close minded, just being open to learning about yourself. I feel
Mm,
like people that are so can be prejudiced or racist or close minded to Indigenous people is maybe they feel like that lack of culture for themselves, or maybe that lack of identity for themselves. And just to tune into themselves, like what can I do to be a better person? What can I do to be a better me and a better community members, is to look at that self-worth work, and to be just a good community member to others and to keep learning. It's never too late to learn. I feel like non-Indigenous people, whether they're an ally or they're wanting to be an ally or they're wanting to do better as like an instructor to bring in Indigenous content, I feel like that's a really popular subject right now. And there's this fear that they're going to do it wrong, or they might not know the right protocol, or they often tokenize me or other people to do it for them. But I feel like there's so many learning opportunities, there's so many platforms, there's so many books, there's so many resources available that not doing anything at all is the wrong thing to do. Trying is the right thing to do, is and just to keep learning, to be open to doing more.
Hmm. And don't fear it. I think there's no, I lose nothing by lifting you up and amplifying your voice. If anything, I get a healthier society to live in. And I mean, the greatest benefit is I get to spend time with you. But I think there's a lot of fear around loss, right? Like you'll hear people say, well, I didn't do anything to these people. No, you didn't. And I understand that. But don't worry, you're not losing the title to your house because we fund healthcare in a different way for Indigenous people whose teeth and hair are falling out because they were institutionalized. And you know what I mean? Like it's just like that I think is a really hard pill for me to swallow because I mean, I watched my dad for 25 years inside of the correctional system and it was an 80% recidivism rate. And the reason why it was an 80% recidivism rate wasn't because the people wanted it to be. It was because the supports weren't in place. The cultural adaptation wasn't there. The learnings weren't there. The self-respect and the value and the love for self wasn't there. The structure of the home wasn't there. The language was gone. The ability, one of the things that we put into the institution when we built the new facility was putting the ability for women to be able to cook in their pods because cooking is such an important matriarchal exercise in terms of identity to culture. Is if I know how to feed my family, then when my family comes in from wherever they are, I'm nurturing and I'm caring for them, right? For our men, the men don't understand their role in the society anymore in a matriarchal. How do I take care of somebody who doesn't take care of themselves or doesn't want me or is riddled by addiction? Like there's all of these different things where you can just take it down to the very distillation of the root cause of these issues to learn and to embrace that opportunity to grow and shift a society.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like lots of people don't realize that they don't take care of themselves in that self-love aspect. Maybe it's like they're really good at nutrition or they're really good at that physical aspect, but they really need to work on that emotional connection to self and just keep working on themselves and being a better person. So it's super important for sure.
Yeah, I think that's where the medicine wheel activity that we did was so powerful. And it was so interesting to see how everybody's medicine wheel on day, I think it was day 3 of the workshop. Like at first it was like, yeah, we're okay. I just sat for a really long drive. So like maybe my hips hurt or whatever. But like at the end of it all, it was this spiritual and emotional side that was the lowest. Whereas I thought, well, no, it was the emotional side. And I was shocked. I was like, why is everybody so sad? And they were like, we're so sad because it's ending. And I was like, oh.
Right. Just having those deep conversations make such a big difference for sure. I feel like life can move so fast sometimes that you forget to really think about those big things that matter for sure, and continuing to reflect on self is really important. So I feel like yeah, especially community connection makes a huge difference with that emotional aspect.
I, I agree. Okay, well, one final thought. If you want to leave people with one final thought, that's your groundbreaking thought of being an Indigenous educator and an Indigenous woman in a society that maybe doesn't always accept you. What's that one thought that you want to leave?
Sure. To other Indigenous youth and people, I hope you keep working on yourself, healing yourself. These past couple years, I've done so much cultural growth and identity growth, and just working on myself. Counseling and therapy has been so beneficial to me. Going back to movement after such a long time of not having it, growing up with sports is so important. Just keeping that inner medicine wheel balanced is really the key to success and the key to being the best version of yourself. And no one you're not in competition with anyone. There's no one against you. You're going to be the one person that's with you for your whole life, and your biggest competition is yourself being the best version that you can be every single time. And yeah, I hope everyone keeps learning and they enjoy it. And yeah, if anyone wants to follow along on Mio Movement at their Instagram or Facebook socials, I like to share the language posts in there. Starting to learn how to draw on my iPad, so that's been really fun, doing a creative outlet with that through language and art. And yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining. And all of those things that Brooklyn has mentioned, particularly around how to get in touch with her, how to follow her journey, how to learn a little bit of the language and stay connected, we'll drop those in the description box below. I do want to thank you again, Brooklyn. I know we've had a couple of false starts with this one because of schedules and sicknesses and, the usual beginning of the season stuff. But I'm just so very grateful that you were able to join and that we could have this time together. It's very powerful.
Of course, I'm so glad that my voices are covered. You would not have wanted to be on a couple weeks ago. Hi, hi. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
This was so good. And, listeners and viewers, remember, protect your peace, chase your dreams, and stay unbreakable.